Howdy y'all, and welcome back to Kerbal Kolonization with Bogatir. And this time, we're going to set up and, well, do a little bit of, like the title card said, grinding. Starting off with a Kerbal biome mapping satellite. So here we go with our tried and true small satellite launcher, getting off the pad and turning north, because we need to get ourselves into a polar orbit to do the biome mapping. And this is, this launcher is very dependable at this point. I know exactly how it flies. It's got tons of delta V, and it gets these little mapping satellites into orbit just fine the first time. So we're going to get up, and we're going to set ourselves up for an orbital altitude of about 250 kilometers around. Most of the world's, the biome scanner does best at about 250 kilometers. And we just pop it up there, and we get it started doing its thing. And you really want to do the biome mapping for every major planet ASAP, because that's how you're going to maximize your science gains, is making sure that you can hit all those biomes that you possibly can. So here we go again, slight modification of the rocket, dumped the old fairing for the new stock fairing, and we're going to send this one out to Minmus. And as you can see here, this is a little bit chunkier than the last satellite, specifically because I'm trying to do as much of the orbital science in one shot as possible, because I'm trying to get a few more parts unlocked. So we've got some basic, yeah, the rocket flipped out there. I don't remember why. Unfortunately, this is all post-commentary, so it's been quite a while since I recorded this video. So regardless, we're setting up, and we're going to start doing our science as we start getting everything set up to get into a polar orbit and start the mapping. And also, I fitted this satellite with a relay dish because it's going to form at least a primitive communications network for working around Minmus. So hopefully some of my other probes and landers that wind up on Minmus will be able to use this satellite long term as a relay back to Kerbin, so that I can also use the much smaller and much simpler antennas rather than the bigger ones. And as you can see, once again, mapping Minmus is just... it looks ridiculous, but it'll get there. It'll get there pretty quick. Yeah, I was planning right now, we're actually getting set up. Since we made our landings on the moon, we're going to be getting set up to go to Minmus soon. So I wanted to make sure that I had Minmus well mapped. And the reason is that Minmus is where all the money is. Well, where the science is. So to start off with, going to get ourselves some of the 2.5 meter command pods in various parts. And here we are back with our Kerbin. That one got completed. So we grab the science from there and pop that back down to the planet. And guess what? I took that same rocket that I sent to Minmus. Well, not this. Well, yeah, actually, this is pretty much an exact copy of the same one that went to Minmus to do the biome scanning of the moon. Because on my first trip your first trip, it doesn't really matter where you land, because you're going to be landing in a new biome. But after that, you kind of want to make sure that you are landing in new ones. And the scan site, the biome map was not quite as pretty as some of the other ones, but again, gets the job done pretty quickly. Now, prior to going to Minmus, I actually kind of wanted to get a little bit more experience for some of my Kerbals. And in this case, I'm sending Jeb back to the moon. Yeah, I know. It's another lunar mission with pretty much the exact same rocket, which means we have the exact same limitations, especially when it comes to the surface experiments package, because we don't have a scientist along still. It's still just a pilot and an engineer. But we're going to get Jeb and the new girl. Keep missing getting her name. But we're going to be getting both of them some good experience with the lunar landings. Now, this one's going to come back in real time, because this is right about the moment I started to look for a landing zone, and I realized I was passing directly over one of my favorite spots to land. It's this large crater in the northern hemisphere that has a canyon coming off of it to the north. And, for whatever reason, I just like this landing zone because it's, well, easier to find. It's also a massive impact crater, which is cool. It has the canyon, also cool. And so I make a very Kerbal landing. And the very first thing I do is I just stop. Now, this is the advantage of flying a rocket that I've flown before. I know how much delta V I'll have left over when it's time to go home. So I know I have 400, 500 meters per second of delta V to just play with. In this case, I play with it by just stopping my rocket. Now we're coming down pretty much only under the moon's gravity, which, You know, again, it's inefficient, just like launching straight up is inefficient. Landing straight down is inefficient, but, you know, 400 meters per second worth of fuel left over, and I can't take it with me back home. So the first thing I do is I boost back, actually reversing my orbit. I'm almost going completely retrograde now, to make sure that I land inside the crater and not on the rim, because the rim of this crater is, I want to say, a kilometer high. I think it's about a kilometer high, and it's extremely rough. It's not a nice place to land. So I boost back into the crater, and again, just get set up as normal. This is this is a very Kerbal landing. My first landing was this nice, pretty, it looked professional and clean. This is a Kerbal landing. So here we are. I'm definitely coming down closer to this larger impact crater than I want to, because, you know, you don't want to land on the rims because they are very sharply sloped, which makes everything harder. And you don't want to tip a lander over. So I'm coming down and kind of think, I'm looking at this and I'm like, yeah, I'm coming right down on top of the rim of this crater. So I tip myself over, tip it over a little bit more, make sure I have the stability assist on this time, unlike the last time when I took off from the moon and didn't have it on and weaved around like a drunken idiot. And now we go back to holding retrograde because we kicked it back to the east to avoid this crater, and I'm going to try to put it down between all these craters in a nice flat little landing zone. Feeling very confident and cocky about myself. Coming in nice and pretty. And as you can see, my side tanks are starting to run dry, but those are coming all the way to the surface with me no matter what, because that's where the landing legs are attached. So we don't want to lose those. So once again, coming back down under the moon's gravity, and everything's, you know, looking pretty good. Jeb's having a good time. That's it. Nellery's having a good time. And we're just taking a look at the landing zone, and I'm coming right down amongst rocks. Now, this is a Kerbal Space Program, and these rocks are primarily just for show. I could land right in it and I'd pass straight through it. It's not a real physical object to hit. But, you know, I want it to look pretty. So Jeb decides, you know what, let's just park it between the rocks. Because, you know, if you're going to land on the moon, being able to take a look at some of these rocks that are probably ejecta from when the impact happened. And yeah, a little rougher landing, but there we go. Deep impact. Land inside one of the big craters on the moon. And we'll get everything out and get about doing our science. And back to the name of the episode, the grind. This is kind of part of it, because I don't want people falling behind. I want Jeb and Nellery here to start getting some experience. And I need the science, I need the money, I need the experience. So we're off on a fairly bog standard lunar landing, just to rack up some more of that experience. Experience, money, science, you know, get it all done. So, and now Jeb is on the surface of the moon for the first time. And he didn't get to be the first one here, but, well, he'll get another crack at it. There's plenty of other bodies to land on in the solar system. Kerbal system. I always mess up the names. So, Jeb pops it out, gets himself his flag set up. And I try very hard to have some kind of system so that it's easier to tell where I'm landing and what each flag represents. But, oh well, whatever. So, got Jeb out, set him up to just look awesome standing there on the surface of this moon. And now we'll pop Nellery out because she is going to become very, very busy very, very shortly. And again, I send her up to the command pod to get out so that I don't accidentally axe a solar panel with her. Yeah, you know, there's all these little quirks about flying your individual ships and your individual missions that you kind of start to learn. You kind of start to get used to, and it's one of those things that I could probably fix it. I could move my solar panels. I could do a few other things, but at the same time, you know, the old adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Of course, being an engineer, we usually, if it's not broke, we try to find a way to break it. Beauty shot. All right. So now, time to set off to work. So fast forward, because we've already seen most of the surface experiment package getting set up. Here's Nellery grabbing everything for the base set, for the getting the base. Oh, And if you ever work with the Surface Experiments package, make sure that you take the screwdriver as well. I found out when I was doing this that for whatever reason, the power drill, yeah, I can't attach things with the power drill. So I had to go back and get the screwdriver. Oh well. Anyways, fast forward to Nellery getting everything set up. And once again, those terrible, terrible calibration values. But you know what? I don't have a scientist along, so there's nothing I can do about it. And there's plenty of other biomes anyways. So doing a last minute count, make sure that I actually have everything put out. Everything is activated. And it's time to go get back in our ship and get back to Kerbin. We're not here to stay just yet. In fact, right now, we're where I'm at in the game, because again, this is post-commentary, so I've actually been playing ahead a little bit. But we're actually going to be starting to get on our permanent manned presence in space here before too long. So very much looking forward to that, especially on the moon, because I like setting up bases. It's one of the main reasons that I did this playthrough, is because I wanted to have a chance to do all those bases, make the cool looking bases, put them on different planets, get all that stuff set up, really build a real working space program. So now we're going to go out here and we're going to do our science again. And yeah, honestly, I really miss the community science messages mod, because this will very, very quickly get boring. The reading them, at least. And the telescope doesn't work on the surface of the ground. It'll actually work once you've boosted 1 whole meter into the air. The telescope starts working. Whatever. So take our scientific readings and get ourselves ready to head back into space. Again, one of my favorite parts in the game right now, that science container. We needed that thing for years. And we wait a little bit, because we're going to do the different liftoff that I've been talking about previously. The one where we boost, get off the ground. Once again, still squirrely. And as you'll notice, my outer fuel tanks were not firing. And that was because they didn't have any gas left. But I was too busy trying to use my telescope to sneak a few quick pictures as I'm lifting off for a little bit extra science. But I did time it right, and so we're going to be able to boost off the surface, and instead of trying to go into orbit around the moon, we're just going to boost directly back to Kerbin from lunar orbit, which is a little more efficient. Again, I'm fat on Delta V. I've got plenty of it left, so it's not a real big deal that I keep trying to maximize my efficiency, but it's never a bad habit to get into the good habit of looking for ways to not waste a lot of gas, because inevitably you're going to come to the position you're going to say, yeah, I got plenty of gas, I don't need to worry about it. I can make an inefficient maneuver, and then at the end of things you're like, oh no, I can't, and suddenly I'm out of gas, and suddenly you're having to consider whether or not you can have your Kerbals get out and push. So again, what I'm doing is I'm using that telescope to keep taking images of the different biomes as I fly over, because each of them's worth 16 science, and science is science. So we make our boost back burn, and we get everything set up and trim ourselves down to a nice capture orbit that we're not going to be coming back out of. So I'm still trying to grab more and more images as I whip over the top of the moon. And oh, yeah, as I'm playing this game, it's odd. There are certain missions where I'm flying them where I'll spend 85-90% of my time staring at those orbital info panels, taking a look at the Delta V, the vessel info, just watching all the numbers tick by, and then suddenly I'll look up and, oh, that's gorgeous. So, yeah, give yourself a chance to stop and enjoy the game from time to time, because it is pretty easy to get wrapped up in all the numbers, because, the numbers are important. But here we are returning back to Kerbin with our payload of science and our 2 slightly more experienced Kerbalnauts. Splash down. Alright, so let's get a hold of it. That thing seems like it's floating higher in the water. Odd. Anyways, get ourselves back to the spaceport and take a look at our rewards. And right there, simple run to the moon and almost 500 science earned. We'll put that to good use. And the crew gained some experience. Nellery is up to level 1, and Jeb got a little bit more experience, as well as his Mooner landing ribbons, including that EVA time ribbon, because I made him just stand on the surface of the moon while he waited for Nellary to do her thing. So, and Nellary's got her usual passel of ribbons for the first time off the ground. So taking a look at our science, one of the first things we do is we just grab those much bigger fuel tanks, because those are going to be important later. I don't grab the atomics yet because, in my opinion, until I really start going interplanetary, and I mean more than just Eve and Duna, I don't really need nukes. I mean, they're good, they're efficient, but you don't really need them. I use them mostly for going out to Jewel or Moho. And so I'm taking a look around, seeing what else I can shop up. Again, science is king. So if you can find a place where you can grab yourself some more science experiments, that's really where you should be grabbing it. And that is, again, the faster you get science experiments, the faster you get through the tech tree. So I'm browsing around because there's a whole lot of stuff I do kind of want to get. But right here, that seismic accelerometer is a pretty chunky science experiment. And it's got those relay dishes, which, if I start going much beyond the moon and Minmus, I'm going to need them. But right here we have the seismic hammer. And this is another one of the D-Magic parts. And those seismic sensor pods, you actually use those as part of the experiment, where you detach those pods and you send them farther out on the surface to get better readings from your, basically it thumps the ground to give it some tremors. So it's a very useful little experiment that can yield a lot of science. So I like to grab that one. But instead we got a few minor construction parts, because I do want to start doing proper fairings and getting things set up. That exo Kerbal drill requires an atmosphere, which means it's not going to be much help on the Mun and Minmus, but some of these other parts might be. So ultimately I wind up grabbing that seismic accelerometer and move on back to the main game. So here we are, and it's time for a rescue mission. At some point during this, I've picked up 2 contracts to rescue 2 Kerbals from orbit, and they're riding pretty close together in orbit. And what we're going to do is we're going to hop up and try to grab both of them. And the first thing I do is I wait until they get a little bit closer, because I don't want to have to wait for multiple phasing orbits to catch up with them. I'd rather launch and be fairly on top of them right off the bat. So we go for launch, and something, as much as I like SRBs, something about the way I set things up makes all of my solid rocket booster missions super squirrely. And this rocket was such an unbelievable pain to keep pointed in the right direction until I got rid of those SRBs. But anyways, moving on. Why are we doing a rescue mission aside from just, the nicety of rescuing people from orbit? And the reason for that is Kerbals are expensive, psychotically so. To put it into some perspective, the first Kerbals, I need to talk about the procedure here. First thing I'm going to be doing is setting up a matching the planes with the target, so that I'm in the same plane that they are, which is, anytime you're going to go to dock with somebody, the first thing you have to do is match planes. So get the plane set up. The plane change maneuver, just like going to Minmus, although we're not going to Minmus, we're staying around Kerbin. Man, running my mouth. Okay, why are we having to worry about rescuing a bunch of Kerbals? And the reason is they're expensive. To put into perspective, the very first Kerbal that I hired cost like 63,000 funds. And for numbers wise, that is more money than I spent on like the first 4 rockets that I launched. All right, so here we are, and I'm setting up the intercept. And double checking and see, it doesn't take a whole lot. What I did is I went into a higher orbit so that they would catch up with me, and then I dropped my orbit back down to where they are. And this is very, very twitchy, because tiny, tiny little changes in your velocity can result in huge changes in where that intercept is. And as a consequence, I had to do this several times. Again, playing this game again for the first time in quite a while, so I was very rusty at it, and it showed because this wasn't the quickest thing I've ever done. So anyways, having to set this up and make my initial burn to bring us close as we can. Now, as you can see, we're getting closer, and I'm watching those guys get down there, and I'm going to trim my approach up, because what's going to happen is you'll notice that one of the things that it had marked out there was our velocity at closest approach. Because again, I'm dropping down onto his orbit, I'm still at a different orbit, so I'm moving at a different velocity. And I'm bouncing back and forth between his, well, not his, her command pod and my pod to try to get an idea of where we're at with relation to one another. And you can see we're now flying in formation very close, and I'm tweaking my velocity to try to keep our ships as close as possible so that our orbits are as near each other as we can be. So turn on to the target, and I give it a slight boost to try to minimize our velocity between each other. So there we are, and that is looking pretty good with a distance of, well, distance is opening up again. So, but we are closing down again because we're getting closer to another intercept point. So this is kind of the dance in and out, getting ourselves lined up as good as we can. And something that used to be, again, I don't know if I don't have an option ticked or whatever, but it used to be when you have a target selected, when you're not in the map view, but when you're in the actual ship view, it would show up. You could see there would be a pink marker out in the distance that said, there they are, that's who you're looking for. And unfortunately, as always, any important docking maneuver is going to take place in the dark, because that's just a KSP rule. So now I'm trying to look around, trying to minimize our target velocity, our difference in velocity, so that we're not getting away from each other. Now we're only drifting at 0.1 meters per second, so that's pretty good. That's as close to stationary as you're really going to get. So now I am looking around, desperately trying to spot this dark gray little pod that is all of 3 meters wide in the vastness of space. And since it's just a pod, there's no power, so there's no lights. So I decide, hey, you know, it'd be better switch over to that pod and look for my ship, which is just there off to the left. So we let go, and we point towards it, and we hit the gas. And you have to do this. This is the only way you can collect the Kerbals, because you can't dock with the pod, because when the game puts the pod up there, it literally just picks a Kerbal, a part that can hold a Kerbal, and throws it in orbit. And that's literally all it does. So you are going to have to make an EVA to get to the other ship. So here we are, we're coming up pretty quick, and I'm realizing that I did not stow my solar panels, and a Kerbal moving at 10 meters per second can shear a solar panel off. But hello, and there's the rescue ship. Now it's just a matter of drunkenly wandering around to the side of the ship and getting in. So hopefully the next one will not have to be done in the dark, but we drift a little bit closer, trying to find the right spot. Now this part that she's getting on board, in the base game, it doesn't have this hatch. And the problem is, since this part can hold Kerbals, that part, that two-man section right there, can wind up with Kerbals in it. So what happens is, if the game decides to throw that part in orbit with a Kerbal in it to be rescued, you can't get him out. The Kerbal is literally stuck in there, and you can't get him out. And you can guess how I found that out one time. So I actually have a mod that puts those access hatches on top so I can get Kerbals in and out. But yeah, anyways, so here we are setting up for our second intercept, and it's going to happen on the day side. Hallelujah. So got to get the tweaks in, because this is just kind of one of those processes that takes time. Now, one of the things that you can do that, again, I haven't messed with the game in a while, is you can actually right click on that intercept, and it'll keep the information about how close you're going to make your intercept up, so you can make your tweaks to the maneuver node without, so that you can make your tweaks without having to take your eyes off of it. So you can see the effect that you're having, which makes everything work a little bit better. So right now, getting our in position to make our deceleration to drop down to the next pod's orbit, because I had boosted upwards. I'm above them. They were sweeping underneath me. So now I'm going to slow down to speed up and catch up with them. Orbital mechanics is weird. And it's something that you kind of fight with when you first start playing this game, that none of the maneuvers that you have to do make any sense. To go faster, you have to slow down. To slow down, you have to speed up. You know, to go higher, you've got to boost at your lowest point. There's so many counterintuitive things that you have to do to make all this work. And yet, after you've played the game, well, in my case, I've played the game 3,000 hours, and kind of hoping my wife isn't listening to that, because right now I know she's thinking, how much work could you have done around the house in that much time? But anyways, when you've played the game for as long as I do, you just kind of get it. Eventually, it does kind of become second nature to mess with the orbital mechanics. It's weird, but it does happen. But it's just so utterly counterintuitive. And when you read the accounts of the first astronauts and just how much they had to do to figure out how to operate in space, it's kind of amazing, because, it's one thing to learn the orbital mechanics when you're just playing a game and you can hit, F9 to quick reload your ship and try it again if you mess up, but when you're actually sitting on top of a rocket in a command capsule that's made out of tinfoil and, balsa wood, and you're about to go rocketing into space at over 7 kilometers per second, and you've got to intercept something else that's traveling as fast as a rifle bullet and meet up in space, dock, and do your thing, and those guys were learning. They were still learning. So my hats are off to them. So now we're trying to trim it up, get ourselves to the right intercept position. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. We just got to get close. That's all we got to do. Just got to get close. So what I did right here was I actually was making my, you can see what happens as our target speed difference between the speed goes towards 0. The intercept starts going crazy. You're there. Now in this case, we're moving at about 0.5 meters per second, or 0.3 or 0.5. So that's easily overcome. So I pop out and look for the ship. And as soon as I think I see it, I let go and whip over there with my jetpack, or manned maneuvering unit, or Kerbal maneuvering. I guess this will be a KMS. Anyways, you can see it getting closer, and we're just going to have to coast. Don't want to get going too fast. You have a ton of EVA fuel. When you're in a Kerbal, the actual manned maneuvering systems that they used in the used on the shuttle only had a few meters per second of delta V. I think it was like, all told, they had 2 meters per second of delta V was all they had. Whereas in the case of Kerbals, you have several hundred. So you don't have any issues. Play whack a Kerbal there. Yep. You don't have any issues in terms of how much delta V you're packing, but you still don't want to get going too fast, because the jets have a lot of fuel, but not a lot of thrust. So grab ourselves, and we have everybody aboard, and it is immediately time to come home, because I've got no other reason to stay up in space. This is done, and by this point in this play session, I was completely done. I was ready to be done with this mission. So immediately go retrograde. I got plenty of gas, so just burn it, toss the service module, and get ourselves back down to the ground. And that's the nice thing about rescue missions. Not only do you get the Kerbals you rescue, you essentially Shanghai them in whatever space program they were part of. Now they're a part of your space program. And you get paid for it as well. So instead of it costing, 60, 100,000, I've had a game where I had my Kerbals were costing over $1 million a piece. So instead of having to pay for the Kerbals, which are stinking expensive, you can just go Shanghai somebody else's Kerbals, bring them back down to the ground, you get paid for it, and then you get to keep them. So come back down in a little bit of a rolly, hilly area. Thankfully, we're not going to go rolling down the hills, which has happened before. I've gone tumbling down the side of a mountain in a landed pod before. And here we go. A little bit of science, reputation, and money, and both of my rescued Kerbals are going to start off at level 1, which is beautiful. And they even get ribbons for somebody else's mission going south. All right, so go through our contracts that we did get complete. Again, 51,000, 74,000, it's not bad money. All righty, this has been Bogatir. I'll catch you next time.